Hi, listeners. Today, Howard and I discuss what we are hearing from corporate law firm management and how they want to grow. Enjoy. So, Howard, what are some of those themes that you're seeing and some of the challenges that you're being faced with, I'm being faced with as it relates to firms uh, wanting to grow and the talent they're talking to?
The law firm leaders that I'm in contact with are asking me over and over again the same. They're kind of ask their wish list is exactly the same. Is that onesies and twosies are great, Howard? I really want a team. I want a group. Make it happen. And I understand all that, and I think um, again, it's like if a law firm leader can do 10 onesies and twosies, over the course of 12 months, like that's gonna make some runway. That's gonna make it happen. But the teams and groups, much harder to pull off. The degree of difficulty is a challenge. There's a real prize if you get it right. Um, but again, it's like there's a lot more work that's involved in pulling together a team, and the team has to go together, that the conflicts has to be resolved. But everyone wants a team or a group. It lowers the risk profile of doing these deals in the marketplace. They have a better traction rate in terms of they don't they stick around for a lot longer. They're embedded in the organization. They don't leave as easily. There's obviously integration issues, but the onesies and twosies, a lot of management time is spent just bringing those people to the line, and I feel that if I'm going to devote that amount of time and energy, I would rather to put that to use as a team of people in a certain practice area, for instance.
And it's across the board, just about everywhere, with the firms that have acquisition growth as their goal. They've figured it out. They're done with the ones and twos, and yet I still find lots of firms that are cautious, going to beat that same drum and remain their size and almost just address attrition, natural attrition, where clients are taking their teams or their individuals or people are retiring or moving on, or various life factors that come into play. So I see both, but I definitely see the firms with strong leadership and a very strategic approach to growth from an acquisition standpoint. It's all um, firms, so it's groups, it's small groups, small firms, and or entirely acquisition of firms. So I'm working with firms, Howard, that are very open and have been speaking or becoming more open to talking about acquisitions or combinations of firms, anywhere to a quarter to half a headcount of them, or a full double the size of their firm combination. So a firm that might be 300 going to 600, a firm might be 100, 150 going to 300. There's this openness because what I've seen is they're all dealing with competition in a way where meaningful growth would change that for them. But certainly complexity has increased through these matters, and um, and yet you're right. There's something sticky about a group of people going if it's done correctly.
And Chris, your client base, do they have they done these types of transactions before, embarking on a team or a group move? Because sometimes it's a very rosy idea of going after a team and group, but when you're actually doing it, it's pretty ruthless.
Correct. So there's definitely lots of first times for clients that I've done work for where we're moving groups. Now, um, I have, I would say that a number of these firms that I'm proposing groups to, I'm working with firms that are asking for groups. They've done it before. And we've set expectations way in advance on exactly how this is going to look, but with an openness to being um, flexible and frankly creative, because there's sometimes we're either pulling from more than one firm or it's a multiple city dynamic. Um, Many times I'll have a client come to me and say, "Hey, Chris, we need to fix X office." And I said, "Okay, how we arrive to that might be a little backwards. We might have to uh, look at something that backfills what you're trying to do, but also expand it in a way that maybe you weren't thinking of when we first talked. And that's happened several times. So I think firms need to be, it's okay to be very focused and strategic, but they also need to be open-minded to how we go about that process.
And are these firms kind of structured to kind of make this, if they're going after a team or a group, is the leadership team comfortable with making faster decisions as part of that process? Because I always found that the onesies and twosies have a natural rhythm,
Yeah.
right? And so the natural default is we'll put them into the machine, and then however long it takes because this is how we're structured. With a team or a group, it's a little bit of an uncharted territory, right? Because the decision-making process is very concentrated, it's very different.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Right. So I'm really big on vetting clients, and I'm really big on understanding, do they have the willpower? Do they have the joint equity to pull off a deal like this? Is everybody in agreement? I don't chase fantasies, and I'm very interested with the why behind it versus this sounds like a nice idea. And so um, there's definite complexity regardless of their circumstance. But I have seen the firms that have been to bat, have swung, have won, and the ones that even haven't maybe had their victories and maybe walked away with kind of licking their wounds a little bit. To me, I can trust those people more because they're humbled. They know how they've could have done that better, and they're coming back to me and I'm asking them hard questions like, what's your skeletons? Where have you failed at what we're trying to do? What have you learned? And really, what are you aiming for? So I'm looking for human. I'm not looking for Superman, and I'm looking for the right team to pull the deal off. And so you're right. Like the partner deals, it's it's a machine. Do you have the right players in place unless it's someone with a substantial book, and that's a different part of the conversation. But yeah,
But I find with the teams or the group kind of moves, I think that those rest with you need to have a very compelling market narrative that makes sense, and crafting that narrative takes a lot of effort to that with the data and the intelligence, but just being market facing. Like if you knew nothing about both firms, what is that market narrative that firm A merges with or acquires a team? And I think that's really interesting because I think to whoever is able to put together that narrative, it has to be compelling for
yeah.
all parties. And it's not about the dollars and the cents. It's about what makes, from a strategy perspective, what resonates. And I think there's again a lot of people are struggling with that narrative rather than just kind of pushing people, having a conversation with this team and seeing what happens.
Yeah, that's kind of the um, wish and pray approach versus being very strategic. Yeah, what is it that other people say about it? What does the media see? How do the clients perceive it? How do competition perceive it? Um, Perception is as powerful as truth. I like to tell people, and so um, making waves can be very important, but if it doesn't align with what you're doing and what you're trying to do, then it's sort of a waste of time. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting because it's bringing up some other dynamics I'm thinking of here of the challenges of groups. So onesies, individual hires of partners, integration requires less work, although it definitely requires work. The work to integrate a team or an entire law firm, I mean, it's like getting married all over again every time. And you got to meet the family and you got to learn how to live 4 seasons together and live through thick and thin and get them on the comp system and find them on their bad days because they're humans too. And so I, there is this concept of a rosy picture. And the truth be told, getting the deal done is the easy part. Integration is is really where the work is at. And I think firms, when it comes to this trend of acquiring larger and larger human capital assets that we're basically describing here. Um, the insurance to make that deal a success um, is the proper team behind it, catching them and fully integrating them and letting them be a part of that team and everyone saying the same thing and singing the same song and moving forward together. That's the success. And I've seen firms do deals and they'll wait a couple years and they'll really come together and make sure that they're one solid firm before they're like going off to the next one. There's some of that there where I'm very watchful and I'm looking for continued success.
We see that when after the deal, when after the acquisition has been made by a particular practice group, um, the sheer challenge of accelerating that new group to the marketplace. So again, we're beyond integration, but the idea of signaling to the marketplace and the potential client base that this team now has this capability with these individuals with this expertise, what kind of revenue and client opportunities can we now go after in the marketplace?
Yeah,
Like that's new territory, right? So how does that actually happen? Who's driving that?
yeah.
Is that low hanging fruit, or is that purely aspirational now that you've got additional people into the organization or the practice area?
Yeah, so what you're saying is the team ready to then support and get them out in front of clients as quickly as possible, integrate those clients, generate the fees, make sure they're cash flowing and making sure they're firing on all engines, doing what they're
Correct.
supposed to do.
That's right.
That's yeah. And firms that know how to do that, it's extremely important, strong selling point to the groups that are considering them, especially with the success.
It's huge because it de-risks the opportunity for
Yeah,
the incoming group because if they're joining this organization, well, what am I getting?
yeah,
Who's going to be doing this stuff? Who's on point for this? And so
yeah.
it's not always specified up front. So to your point, let's get married. We'll have a happy life and have lots of kids. Doesn't really work like that.
Sorry, Howard, I'm taken. um, yeah, I mean, it's just life. It's hard to go 100 miles an hour, create a union, and keep running at that pace. And firms that are sober about this and have been it a couple times are leaps ahead of the others who are starting to think about it. Now, you and I can provide wisdom to firms and we can advise about how to approach that, but it should be with you know a plan.
Well, we're seeing more emphasis where people are actually having those discussions, interviews now that last piece that I mentioned around accelerating the new group onto the existing platform, and usually it's a larger platform. Those discussions happen way up front to kind of give some warm signals around like if you were to join us, this is what you'd be getting. This is what we could do together. And so it's not just doing the deal. It's like talking about how we're going to run tomorrow and the vision of tomorrow for the benefit of the larger organization. And that's a pretty that's I come back to the compelling nature of the narrative where that has to be framed in the very early discussions with obviously the two entities.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely critical. Um, well, I this topic's near and dear to my heart because I feel as though for firms to remain competitive, they have to think in larger acquisition sizes. Um, and and yet firms that don't have a desire to grow in dramatic ways, um, I respect them. Uh, that continuing to do what they've done because it works for them, I think is fine as long as they preserve their culture. Um, and so it's a busy time. It's a crazy time. There's lots of firms talking. There's lots of groups looking, and law firm executives need to be obviously they are mindful of this, but what are they doing? Are they creating their own strategic plan? Do they have a plan for their team? And are they thinking about growth in a strategic manner that is structured? Um, you can do that as you look at acquiring larger groups or entire firms.
And I think this places a lot of burden on the leadership team because if the team isn't built to do this, right, or doesn't have the aspiration to do this, they're not going to be in office very long. I think that the rate of change is so intense these days that you're going to have to be on this cycle to maintain or exceed the growth plan of the baseline in the marketplace. So it's really interesting to see how law firms structure their leadership teams to facilitate these kinds of opportunities in the marketplace. Because it's not, to your Chris point, it's not one and done.
Yeah.
This is you're on a trajectory to do this on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. 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 Well, thank you, Howard. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Chris.
I'll think about your proposal. Um,
Please, that'd be great.
yeah. um, and everyone will continue to do these. Howard and I will also host guests. So stay tuned for that as we speak with law firm management on the topics that are important to them. Until then, everyone have a great day.